Recently, we talked about games that were, well, feedbacked to death. Somebody's input ruined those games, but sometimes it goes the exact opposite way. In fact, feedback is often very useful. I mean, you're smart. I don't need to tell you that, but still. Hi, folks. It's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games saved by feedback. Let's start off with number 10. It's Resident Evil 8. A lot can change during development, and a lot of those changes can stem from feedback from executives, testers, or just from developers themselves. But rarely do we get a lot of specific insight into when things change and exactly how those changes came about. Look at Resident Evil 2, for example. The original version of that game was going to be wildly different. Look up Resident Evil 1.5 for examples of just how divergent that was going to be. That version of the game, which was more action-oriented and set in a much more serial and empty version of the police station, it was scrapped. The whole project was rebooted, and, well, we got the version we all know today. Resident Evil 4 got rebooted at least 4 different times, as did Resident Evil 8, which went through a ton of changes and alterations during its development as well. Most of these things are your normal limiting scope or changing ideas, but one very big change came very late in development that, if you take the developer's word for it, basically saved the game. See, the original version of Village had swarms of enemies and very low ammo. Think the opening attack segment, but spread out for the entire game. The quality assurance manager had nothing positive to say about all this, and they went as far to say as this made combat feel uninteresting. The game's content was completely divorced from what the development team thought they made. The game was supposed to be this gothic horror, but the nonstop combat made it feel repetitive and frustrating. So the team took the feedback and completely reworked the size and frequency of enemy encounters to make it feel more like a traditional Resident Evil game, and I, for one, feel they pulled it off. If they'd launched with the original version of the game, you could have potentially had a disaster here. And I think this is a case where quality assurance and testers really did their jobs, and through their feedback, we got what is almost certainly a better version of the game. Moving on to number 9, it's Total War Rome 2. Creative Assembly is a studio that is no stranger to the dynamic turnaround. The problem is they can't seem to learn their lesson. It took a while, but they were able to turn around public perception on Warhammer 3, which was impressive considering just how angry fans were regarding the state of the game for a while. But Total War Rome 2's turnaround is even more severe, going from broken and buggy, just a mess at release, to one of the most positively regarded games in the entire Total War series. It wasn't an easy process, and it took years for the studio to fix the game's many glaring issues, as pointed out by fans of the series. And the more technically minded reviews at the time definitely did help, but they eventually put out the Empire Edition and made it free for everybody who owned the game, and that's pretty much when public perception completely turned around on it. Listen, it's not like they were responding for feedback like purely out of the goodness of their hearts. Rome 2 was by far their most expensive and ambitious game up to that point, and they needed it to be a success if the studio was going to survive. When it came out and was hit with all the scathing criticism from top to bottom, the studio smartly recognized they had to turn this game around, or the Total War name wasn't going to be viable going forward. The reputation of their most popular series and their reputation as a game studio was clearly on the line. They had no other choice but to fix this or die. That said, it's easy to say they had to do it, but the reality is that many studios have faced this kind of situation, looking at a broken game at launch that is being reviled by your core audience and failing to step up to meet the challenge of addressing those complaints. Creative Assembly managed to do it. They constantly updated the game, made a lot of significant changes to the experience, improved the AI significantly over the course of many years in order to get this game to a respectable stage. If not for the dedicated fan base, none of it would have happened. And honestly, who knows if Creative Assembly will be alive and kicking today. It's a shame they keep falling into the same trap with stuff like Total War Pharaoh, but at least they got it right with Rome 2. At number 8 is Max Payne 3. When Rockstar revealed they were bringing Max Payne back in 2009, it was cause for celebration among fans. Everyone assumed Max was done for, with no new game for years, and the original developer Remedy moving on to other things like Alan Wake. Fans were giving up on an actual sequel. The announcement was a bit of a double-edged sword, though, because what Rockstar was saying about the new game sounded wildly different than what people had come to expect from the series. A new setting in Sao Paulo, missions to take place during the day. Max is bald, kind of a hobo. What is going on here? There was a lot of concern, and it all turned to anger when Rockstar revealed that on top of everything else, they were replacing Max's iconic voice actor, James McCaffrey, with someone who is not James McCaffrey. Doesn't really matter who it is. And I don't even think they actually revealed who they were going to recast him with. It was specifically because they wanted someone older and more gritty sounding, because I guess James McCaffrey, who sounds like he just got done guzzling gravel before every recording session, doesn't sound gritty enough for them. I don't exactly understand that choice. But whatever. Unsurprisingly, fans were not happy about this. They all made their opinions very loud and clear. The game's original release date got pushed back multiple times, but I have no idea how much Rockstar actually changed to address fan criticism. But we do know for sure they brought back McCaffrey and changed Mac's character model to look more like his voice actor. So in that specific area, they did the right thing, and the game would not have been nearly effective with a different voice actor. Like, anyone remember Splinter Cell Blacklist and how much Ubisoft screwed up by not bringing Sam Fisher's iconic voice actor Michael Ironside? I'm guessing Rockstar didn't want to repeat that whole debacle, so they correctly listened to the fans. There's also a lot of speculation that many of the game's New York flashbacks are added in later as a response to the fan backlash as well, but that's harder to prove. What we do know 100% is that Rockstar was originally dead set on a new voice for Max, and everyone hated it. So they brought back James McCaffrey, R.I.P., a minor thing, but probably makes more of a major difference than a lot of major things. At number 7 is Subnautica. A lot of games managed to find success through early access back in 2014. The rules, they weren't fully established back then. The blueprint hadn't been written yet, so it was sink or swim time for a lot of developers, and they're kind of forced to make things up as they went. Most of these early crowdfunding projects and early access games failed for an almost endless number of reasons, but one big one was a lack of communication. Instead of using early access for its intended purpose as a tool to experiment and gather feedback for your gameplay systems, a lot of developers just didn't do that, and their games suffered for it. One game that managed early access better than most, though, was Subnautica. The game found multiple vectors for gathering feedback, including a way to report bugs and offer feedback within the game itself, which isn't something you see super often even still. On top of consistently putting out updates, they were constantly tweaking the survival elements and overall progression systems in response to feedback, and almost all their changes made for a better game. The original version of the game was extremely punishing in a way that it really just wasn't fun. Later revisions made the survival elements less important and focused more on the exploration and the discovery parts, and that was good. Also good, they expanded base building, kept it simple and fun though, and they reworked the story elements to make them more interesting and just overall made it a better game. And it was heavily influenced by fan feedback. It isn't always what happens in early access, to be clear. Sometimes developers just ignore feedback and take the wrong lessons from player complaints and make a game that's fundamentally worse from how it started. It sucks, but it does happen a lot, too much. So when something like Subnautica comes out and really listens to the fan feedback and builds on it in a smart way, it deserves recognition. At number 6 is Metro 2033 Redux. The original 2010 version of Metro 2033 was of course ambitious, but it was rough, like real rough. The graphics were unrefined, let's say. The level design was awkward and unnecessarily confusing, and the controls were they're stiff and unsatisfying. And then there were terrible, arbitrary feeling stealth segments that felt like getting caught in a coin flip situation. Sometimes enemies would see you through walls, sometimes they'd stare right at you, and you could just sneak by them. Game was not in good shape, but it showed a lot of promise. That promise was mostly realized in its much improved sequel, which all around felt a lot more professional. The first Metro felt kind of like a fan game. The sequel was up there with some of the best FPS games of all time. Most of the changes in the sequel came about because of feedback in the first game. Almost everything that was improved was things that were specifically called out by reviewers at the time. They didn't have to go back and fix the first game, but they did. And Metro fans are all the better for it, because Metro Redux from 2024 is the ideal version of the game. Yeah, you lost some of the the clunkiness, and it kind of takes a little bit away from the game's weird atmosphere, but in this game's case, the better controls made for a better overall experience. The graphics got improved, the stealth, it made some degree of sense. The level design got cleaned up, and they even brought stuff from the sequel in, like being able to wipe your mask. All these changes are things that players wanted in the first place. It's not something anybody had to do. I mean, they already made the sequel at this point, but making the first game as good as the sequel was a smart way to keep the series alive and sort of made it so that when people talked about the series, they didn't say, the first one was terrible, the second one was great. No, the first one's great. They just had to go back after the second one to make the first one great. And number 5 is Atlas Fallen. When it originally launched in 2023, Atlas Fallen was a quintessential AA game. It not in a good way either. Like, I could say that exact same comment and mean something good. I don't here. It was one of those games with pretty decent production values and some creative ideas, but it didn't come together. The opening hours were slow as hell, the enemy variety was lacking, and for an action RPG, they didn't give you a lot of options in terms of customizing your build. The core gameplay, it was solid. The combat was fun, and sliding across sand dunes felt right. All the other stuff, however, quite half-baked. Players let their grievances be known, and the developers actually did something in response. Instead of just giving up on the game and moving on to the next project, hoping it would turn out better, Deck 13 hunkered down and came up with the Rain of Sand update that radically changed the game for the better. What's interesting about this is not just a bunch of bug fixes and gameplay tweaks. They added a lot of new stuff into the main game, like an entire new area, new enemies, dramatically revised story, gets through the old tedious opening much faster. They even brought in new voice actors to play your character and got Ben Starr, Clive from Final Fantasy 16, to play the spirit guide.
No! Stay back! It is too dangerous!
This must be it.
The Wraith!
I wasn't joking.
Not even a small role. He's got more dialogue than anybody else. The list of changes and improvements, it's like a mile long, and it makes for an all-around much better game. They listened to the criticism, and they did something about it. It's still not a game for everyone. Like, it's kind of flawed in some ways, but not most ways anymore. Like, it's a hell of a lot better now than when it first came out. And number 4 is Death's Gambit Afterlife. Rain of Sand was one thing, but Afterlife was on a whole nother level. Less of an update or even a free expansion, Afterlife was nothing less than a complete rework of Death's Gambit, transforming it into something still vaguely recognizable, sure, but almost completely different. The standard game was okay. It was a side-scrolling Souls-like with some interesting designs, some creative ideas, but man, it was buggy as hell. It was pretty linear for a Metroidvania, and it had some weird difficulty spikes. It felt like extremely out of place. The original game wasn't awful, but it felt rough, like a first draft. It needed another pass to clean up the messy elements, and there were a lot of them. And that's exactly what they did here. They revamped the entire world map. They added 8 new areas, completely reworked the talent system. They added more than 20 new weapons, new and expanded endings, new enemies, new bosses. It's nuts. A lot of the original locations and bosses are there, but they're totally reworked in Afterlife, and everything they did was in response to player feedback. People that play Metroidvanias can be brutally honest about what they like, so with the genre so crowded these days, you really have to make a stellar game to gain any kind of... You really got to stand out from the pack, Death's Gambit in its original form did not stand a chance, but with the Afterlife update, it's practically a new game. Death's Gambit 1.5, but it's free. It's the biggest free update I've ever seen for a game, and I've got nothing but respect for the devs for putting this much work in to improve their game. It took them years to get this update out, but it was worth it. Moving on to number 3, it's Pathfinder Kingmaker. The thing with Kingmaker is it's still kind of a mess now. For that, you can blame their publisher Deep Silver, who got the rights to the game and aren't sharing revenue with the developers anymore, so they have no reason to keep updating the game because they're making nothing to update it after 2019. They did keep patching the game up through 2021 though, but after that they just couldn't justify continuing supporting the game when they got nothing from the publisher. In the time they had to improve the game, Owlcat did manage to make a bunch of changes that made the experience a lot more fun and a lot more stable. Almost everything that got improved came from fan feedback too. People wanted turn-based combat, so they put that in there. That's the big one, but there were a lot of important improvements that got put in because of feedback. An example, originally the game had no explanation for how to fight swarm-type enemies. Standard weapons couldn't hurt them, so unless you got lucky with the tooltips, there's a certain point in the game where you got to a dungeon full of buzzing insects, you had no idea how to fight them, unless you, I guess, accidentally brought specialized weapons along. The game did nothing to warn you about any of this, so I don't think you could have done it on purpose unless somebody told you about it, because they had accidentally brought specialized weapons. Hey, you get the point. Players complain, so now the quest giver warns you about the swarm enemies and gives you a few special weapons to fight them. In general, the brutal difficulty of the game got toned down. Random encounters that could wipe your party were made quite a bit weaker. The frequency of dangerous encounters got slowed down, etc. I'm not going to even talk about all the bugs because honestly the game's still kind of buggy, but it is a lot better than it used to be, even with as flawed as it is now. Man, it was bad when it was launched.
And then our leader charged forward.
calculated
Hey,
risk.
hey, wait for me!
And number 2 is Wise 8, Lacrimona of Dana. An unusual one because it's not the quality of the game that got saved because of the feedback, but specifically the translation. Where bad or awkward translations on games used to be pretty standard back in the day, in recent years the expectations regarding the quality of a translated script, it's a lot higher. Most games do a fine job with translations. Yeah, certain language snobs or hardcore Japanophiles might nitpick with the English game scripts, but for the most part they're not going to stand out as egregiously bad. It's pretty rare to see something come along where everyone, even though most clueless layman, starts to notice something severely wrong. The translation has got to be real bad, that even somebody with no knowledge of Japanese can still tell something's messed up. And that's how Wise 8 was. Archaeozoic big hole, right? Somehow they decided that calling someplace a big hole was a right call, even though the Japanese version called it a crevice in English, not in Japanese. They used the English word crevice, or maybe crevasse. I'm not really sure. I've never played the Japanese version. Point is, they used English. Like, the word didn't need to be translated, but somehow they screwed it up anyway. And that's only the start of it. Big problems. Item descriptions, they were wrong often. There was typos all over the place. There was awkward phrasing everywhere. Just straight up wrong names for things. Like the translation was a sloppy rush job. Fans of the series were so upset that the guys behind the translation, NIS America, issued a statement and apologized. They even brought in voice actors to completely re-record all the dialogue, which changed significantly between versions. They released the updated script and audio as part of a free update months later, and while some people might not love the new script, it was a mess before. And finally, at number 1 is The Witcher Enhanced Edition. It's not exactly the first big game to put out a new version in response to criticism, but it's one of the biggest. When CD Projekt Red released their first game, The Witcher, in 2007, they were not expecting much international interest. They didn't put much effort or time into the English translation because the Witcher books hadn't even been translated themselves at that point. They're making a game which they believed was primarily for a Polish audience and not much else. There was an English localization, but it was not great, and the entire state of the game was pretty rickety anyways. So when people outside of Poland actually bought the game, it really caught the team by surprise. They ended up making a lot more money on the game than expected. Usually the expectation at that point was to take the money and run. Sure, the base version of Witcher wasn't much fun to actually play and had a sloppy English script, but the game was done. Move on to the next thing, right? This was the common reasoning at the time, but CD Projekt Red must have realized there was an opportunity here and used it to make a lot of improvements and made an enhanced version of the game. They put it out in 2008 and responded to an attempt to fix almost everything reviewers and players have been complaining about. They redid the script, added a ton of new animations, made new NPC models. They just made the game better in pretty much every way. By By 2008, everyone was pretty accustomed to patches, but these kinds of huge game-changing reworks just didn't happen. When a game was released, it was done. There was no going back. Not to this extent, at least. In a way, you could say The Witcher proved devs could go back and release fixes for broken games that they released stupidly, or in their case, because they didn't expect there to be much more in terms of like the life cycle of the game. It's a problem that we're struggling with now. Some of the blame could fall on CD Projekt Red for perpetuating this kind of nonsense. Like they're still doing it to this day on stuff like Cyberpunk, which launched in a very rough state before getting fixed years later in what was essentially Enhanced Edition. But at the end of the day, I would prefer a game be good eventually rather than bad forever. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. But what do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this one. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter and vote me on Cameo at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.